Welcome to entry number 3 in the IT 3000 series. Today we're talking about software. At its core, software is the set of instructions that transforms a lifeless piece of hardware into something genuinely useful. Think of it this way. Hardware is what you buy, but software is the real reason you bought it. Without those instructions, even the most powerful machine is just metal, plastic, and silicon sitting quietly on a desk. So let's sharpen that definition a little. Software is coded instructions, along with the data those instructions work on, written by humans, saved as files on disk, and then loaded into memory whenever the machine needs to actually run them. And that last part matters. Hardware is capability, software is intent, but nothing truly happens until the two meet in memory and start executing together. Now, once you start looking at all the software running on any given machine, it turns out everything falls into just 4 buckets. At the foundation sits system software, the operating system, drivers, the low-level services that keep the machine alive. On top of that, application software is what the user actually came for: the browser, the spreadsheet, the mail client. Between those two layers lives middleware and runtimes, things like databases, web servers, the JVM or .NET, the quiet glue that lets applications talk to the system. And finally, development tools, the compilers, editors, and pipelines that build all the other 3. And speaking of those development tools, it's worth pausing on what they actually produce, because software doesn't just exist as one thing. It starts as source code, human-readable text a developer types. The build step compiles and links that into an executable file, a binary sitting on disk. When you launch it, the operating system loads it into memory as a running process, which the CPU ultimately experiences as a stream of raw instructions. The key insight: a bug is cheapest to catch at the top of this chain, and painfully expensive once it's already running in production. Let's make this concrete with something you do every day, pressing Ctrl+S to save a file. That single keystroke triggers a small cascade. Your application catches the shortcut and figures out what to write. Rather than talking to the disk directly, it calls a runtime library, reusing code someone else already perfected. That library makes a system call, handing control to the kernel, which in turn wakes the storage driver that speaks the drive's specific dialect. Only at that point do actual blocks hit the hardware and a confirmation ripples all the way back up the stack. Now, before we go further, let's clean up 3 words that people throw around as if they mean the same thing, because they don't. Software is the umbrella, the whole abstract world of code and data. A program is much more specific. It's a concrete executable file sitting quietly on your disk, taking up space and doing nothing until launched. And a process is what appears the moment you launch it, a living instance in memory. One program, opened 3 times, gives you 3 separate processes running side by side. With that distinction settled, software stops being one flat idea and starts branching outward. Each concept beside me is really its own future episode, the operating system that governs everything, the applications you actually touch, the source code where it all begins, the compiler that translates it, the APIs that let programs speak to each other, and the open source movement that shapes how software is shared. Next in the series, though, we step outside a single machine entirely into computer networks. So let's hold on to 3 things before we close. Software organizes itself into 4 categories: system software, applications, middleware and runtimes, and development tools. It also shifts form as it moves from source code to binary to a running process, and each form calls for its own inspection tool. And remember, a program is a file at rest. A process is that file brought to life. One program can spawn many. Software, in the end, is simply the instructions that turn hardware into a tool. See you in the next one at Dargslan.com.